welcome you all to like the first on-site meetup of Frontend RheinMain, like after 3 and more years. I think the last one we had was 2019. Then Corona came. Then we started some live streaming on YouTube. Yeah, and who of you like is new to Frontend RheinMain or didn't know Frontend RheinMain before? Okay, then go ahead and use your QR scanner. So there you find the link to our website, and on the website you will find all the social media links. So we are on YouTube. We have like the meetup group, of course. I think you heard of this event via Meetup, and some other stuff. We have an archive there. You will see shortly. But first of all, I want to thank you, Textbroker guys, especially Nico, who approached me. I think we met some years ago or so, and you somehow remembered somewhere in Rhine-Main region. So, and this was like the trigger where we said, okay, let's do an on-site meetup finally in the year 23 again. So thank you for that, and also thank you for like being the sponsor today. This is the great office with the cool pizza, like actually warm pizza, and the cool drinks. And glad that you all make it. I mean, it's lovely to see the people in real again, and not see some faces on YouTube screens and in 2D. It's lovely. I love it. So that's how also, yeah, maybe diving a bit into the history now. So that's actually you can check out the website. We did some changes on the website recently. And yeah, we started almost 10 years ago as a small meetup nearby Wiesbaden. Yeah, and it evolved since then. So we started with kind of these meetups quite a while ago, and it was a lot of fun always. And then like in Corona times, we did some live stream. And the cool thing in Corona times, like we tried to make the best out of it, was that we could reach out to international speakers. Of course, they don't need to fly to RheinMain, so to say. So we had quite some nice talks there. And this is the first meetup in hybrid mode. If the technology keeps working, this will be is currently being streamed to YouTube as well. So hope all is working nice. The agenda will be that Nico from Textbroker will give a short introduction about Textbroker, and then we'll directly dive into the talk by Dominik about full stack Monorepo development with NX. Dominik is a senior full stack developer, lead software engineer at Textbroker, tackling Angular, CI/CD pipelines, and all that stuff. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, to the talk. And after that, we have, of course, time for Q&A. So if you're watching us from YouTube, feel free to post your questions in the chat, and we will run around with the microphone here in the room for some questions. And we have a ticket, so to say, there for the Enter.js conference. And this will be raffled later. We also have some goodies, something about this in a short time. And of course, we can continue the socializing. We already started later, of course, and yeah, closing about maybe 9 or so. Let's see. So it's open end. And also thanks to RheinMain, they're actually one of the organizers or the main organizers together with X developer to organize the Enter.js conference, and they provided us, luckily, with a full ticket worth more than 1,000 euro for the Enter.js conference. So if you have time next week, actually, if you live maybe in Mainz or Wiesbaden nearby, and want to go there, it's, in my opinion, the best JavaScript conference in Germany. It's very high-level talks. Also, if you were a bit afraid of going there in the last few years, as they had only mostly German talks back then, this changed a lot. So I think at least 50% of the talks are now held in English. So I will go there, so we could meet there again, if you like. And yeah, thanks again for RheinMain for this. And nothing much more from my side to say. Enjoy the evening. Also, please, if you're into it, take some photos, share some impressions. Also, we are happy about any feedback and comments. As it's like the first time we do it after 3 years, we need to get back into a routine a bit. And the hybrid mode is also a bit, this is a kind of a test run today. Hope this works out nicely. And yeah, hope you enjoy the evening and see you later in one of our next meetups. And thanks again, Textbroker, for the opportunity to meet again. And now I would give the stage now to Nico from Textbroker to say a few words. And thank you.
Well, yeah, I'm happy that you guys are here actually, and that I think it's a pleasure for us to host the first meetup of Frontend RheinMain after the long break you guys had. My name is Nico. I'm head of technology here at Textbroker. I'm here since April, so not so long, and yeah, we're gonna talk a bit about the history and current evolvement and maybe some future look in the future. Right, so Textbroker is already like so the first Textbroker came out 2007, and but the idea was actually born 2005 by Jan Becker-Vochler, when he had actually the problem for his own product or his own use case to get texts, and then it took till 2007 when Textbroker then came out, and lots of authors were interested in that, and and that's the platform that it is today. So we still have authors, we still have clients which need texts, and authors provide us then with texts. So you can say Textbroker is a platform. Yeah, you have heard this often, but yeah, it is. Right, and the services are nowadays even more than just content or texts. It's also SEO services, also images you can actually get from us. There are different services, self-service. There's a managed service if you need like lots of texts and you want to have that managed by us. Right, and yeah, the current thing we actually facing, you may have heard of something like ChatGPT, and that's something that actually we not only think about, but we actually need to action on it. And there are also products coming up from us which have thought of this integrated. So you maybe heard people or hear people saying Textbroker might have problems with that. That generative AI may generate that texts, but we think that there's a long way that generative AI still has, and we seen that with all the text that we have, there's still a difference between human texts, and I think it will be there for a long time still. Right, so if you have questions, feel free. We are here after Dominik's talk, socializing, and can also answer questions afterwards. Right, so let's hand over to Dominik.
Great, so welcome to the talk. And already introduced me. My name is Dominik Huppmann. I'm working as a lead software engineer here at Textbroker. And today I'm going to tell you something about full stack monorepo development with NX. I'm first going to go over a few slides, so to get you familiar with the topic, and then we'll dive in the IDE to actually set up an NX monorepo workspace and to do some live coding so you can see what you can actually do inside this workspace. So maybe to first get you familiar with what a monorepo actually is, let's maybe compare it to a traditional polyrepo. So in a polyrepo, you have like multiple applications hosted in multiple repositories. And like if they need some shared library, which is also inside a different repository, they need, of course, to somehow require it. So they're dependent on this repository. Whereas in a monorepo, like all of your applications and libraries will be hosted in one single repository, and they can have like direct access to each other in there. And by the way, I have this graphics from monorepo.tools, which is quite a nice site to get you like also a good overview over the whole monorepo topic. Okay, now let's look at what kind of benefits you would have if you are using a monorepo. So inside a polyrepo, there are some downsides. So for example, code sharing is cumbersome because let's say you want to have like some shared code in app 1 and app 2. And to do this, you of course like have to create a library, for example, and maybe publish it to some registry. And then you need to like also install it in like multiple applications, keep track of like versions and so on. You might have like significant code duplication, let's say, because you don't want to always store everything inside like a real library. So you start like coding it in this app and also in this app. And also like cross-repo changes might be costly, yeah, because let's say you update one library, but maybe it's not compatible with the one app, but with the other app, yeah. So you need to like always keep track of changes in your versions and so on. And maybe also tooling is inconsistent because let's say like in one app you're using ESLint for linting, in the other app you're using TSLint. In the other, you have no linting at all, and maybe that's not what you want. Yeah, so maybe you want to have like one tool that does the job, and not like switch around with this in your different kind of apps. Yeah. So when you're inside a monorepo, like creating new projects is way easier. Yeah. So because you have like set up your whole workspace already, you have your tooling set up and configured, so it's like very easy to spin up new projects inside this. Another good thing is that you can have like atomic commits across your projects. This means that, let's say you're changing something inside one library, and this has like a change to like one of your applications, for example. And you can like fix this breaking change directly inside one single commit. So whereas if you have like a polyrepo, you would first need to publish your package, like install it in your application, do the adjustment there, and so on. So if you're going to like want to revert it, for example, because you did like a mistake, you need to also go through all of this hassle again, whereas with this, you can like just do like a rollback for your commit. And basically you have one version of everything, right? So you don't need to care that maybe version 1.4 of this app is using 1.2 version of this library, and the other one is using another version, and so on. Yeah, so you basically have just one version inside your one repository. And you have developer mobility. And what this means is maybe that, let's say your backend team made a change to some library that's inside a monorepo, and it has effect to maybe one front-end project. And you see that failing on CI maybe because you're testing this connection. So actually the developer working on it can directly fix this without maybe having to wait for the front-end team and maybe telling them to do this actually. So everything's great, right? So you're happy that you can now put everything inside your one big repository and start coding and don't have to deal with all of these downsides anymore. So what could go wrong, right? So of course, there are certain like pitfalls and that you need to cover and things that you keep in mind, and maybe some guidelines that you should follow if you're doing this. And it's actually all about managing things. Yeah? So for example, what will help you is if you're doing a modular approach for this. So you don't want to start like putting everything in one large application inside this monorepo, or just putting all of your code unstructured inside one kind of folder without any clue. And you should maybe also define some boundaries. Yeah. So let's say you have like multiple kind of libraries in there, but maybe they should not all interact together. Yeah. So there should be some like rules, which kind of library has access to what kind of other type of library. And what you also want to do is you want to affect the kind of projects that have changed. Let's say you're making a change, commit this to CI, and you don't want that your like whole CI pipeline tests and lints and builds everything that's inside of it, yeah, but maybe only the kind of projects which are affected by your actual change. And if you're doing these kind of tasks, you don't want to run tasks again for projects which haven't actually changed. Yeah? So if you have run a build once for a project and nothing changed in this project, you don't want to actually run it again because nothing changed in there. I mean, code sharing is quite obvious because you're like in a big code base, so you can do this. But maybe you want to also share code between your front-end and back-end applications. So you could think of maybe some interfaces, yeah, which you're using for some objects inside your back-end, and maybe you also want to have this in your front-end. And you also want to have code generation. I mean, this is not specific to a monorepo, yeah, but it will definitely help you if you have some features like this to speed up your development. And this is where NX comes into play. So NX is like a build tool. If you take this quote from their official page, powerful open source build system that provides tools and techniques for enhancing developer productivity, optimizing CI performance, and maintaining code quality. Yeah. And we're now actually heading over to our CLI and actually setting up an NX workspace. And you can simply do this by using this npx command, create NX workspace. So again, you can like provide like a lot of flags to this command, but the one that we are going to use here is only the option for the package manager. Yeah? So by default, it will take npm as a package manager, but we're going to use pnpm, which is the one I prefer. It's working a bit faster than npm. So what it will now do, it will ask you where you want to create this workspace. So this is just the name of your actual workspace that you want to give it. So we're calling this full stack mono, and it will ask you what kind of stack you want to use first. Yeah, so you can go with none if you don't have like a specific stack, or you can choose between some presets for React, Angular, or Node. So there are more like plugins available, but this is just like for the initial setup. So we are going to use Angular for this, and it's going to ask you what kind of monorepo you want to build. Yeah, so you don't have to use it in a way that you have like multiple applications and multiple libraries inside of it. You can also use it for a standalone project if you want to, and just take care of the benefits that NX provides you as a build system. Yeah. But since we want to talk about monorepos today, we're choosing the second option. And now we're going to choose an application name. For today, I thought we were going to build a little app for music, maybe for sharing your musical preferences or searching for concerts, but we'll just implement like a small part of inside of this application. Going to choose Sus as a style sheet, and we're going to use the new standalone components API from Angular. And we also want to add routing for our application. And this here, it asks if you want to use distributed caching for making your CI faster. This is basically the integration of NX Cloud, which is like their cloud solution that also has like a paid plan. That's basically the things, how they earn money. Yeah? So you can also try to use it. It's like free for, I think, the first 300 runs on your CI system. If you want to, I can tell a bit more about this later, yeah, but for now, I think we would just skip it. All right, so now it would install all the dependencies, setting up the workspace with the different preset plugins. And I already prepared this in my IDE, like the same workspace, to speed things up. Is it sharing? Great. Okay, so let's maybe first have a look about the structure of this workspace, yeah? Guess it's also big enough here. So what you're getting is a folder for all of your apps, which stores like your main applications. You have a folder for your libraries where you can put in like your reusable libraries. You have a presentation folder that you only see in my workspace because that's my presentation in here. And the tools folder is only being used for plugins. That's something we can see later a bit. So you will get ESLint support pre-configured for you out of the box. You will have Prettier set up. You will have Jest as your test runner. In the NX.json, you will have some configurations for your workspace. And of course, you have your package.json and your root tsconfig file, which is basically the tsconfig configuration for your whole workspace. And you can then override this basically based on your apps on your libs where you need it. Okay, so inside our apps, we can see that it already created 2 apps for us. So it created one Angular app because that's what we've chosen as a preset. And it created one end-to-end app, which in this case is Cypress, that's automatically hooked up to your Angular app. One thing that's specific here is that it will create a project.json file where basically the configuration, like the NX configuration for your application is being stored in. And you will see something like the name and like what kind of type it is. And the most interesting part is the targets that you will see in here. Yeah? So you will have a build target for building your application. You will have a serve target for actually serving it and starting your application, and a few more for like extracting your localized strings, linting, testing, and so on. And you can basically use the NX CLI to then just execute these kind of targets. Okay, so I created a README file with some commands to actually guide us through what we want to do. So first of all, we want to take a look at the NX CLI. So you can just use it with NX. You can get all of the possible configuration flags with the help command, of course. And in NX, you have kind of a lot of plugins, like depending on like the presets that you have chosen initially. So if we're going to do NX list, it will show us all of the installed plugins that we have. Since we have chosen Angular, it comes with these pre-installed. And there are also like more plugins available there, like Express or Nest.js or React or Vite. So there's a lot that you can like install and configure for you. All right, so now let's see. If we want to have like more details about one of these plugins, you can just add it to your list command, and it will give you like some output about some executors and generators that like these kind of plugins provide for you. So for example, for the Angular ecosystem, you have like generators for creating components, creating libraries. So if we're going to just pick the one for the library, we can use the nxg command, which is like a generator. So it says nx generate, and then the kind of plugin that you want to run, which is the library in this case. And here we're also getting a few configuration options that you can use for generating the library. Okay, so now we're going to actually create a set of applications and libraries. So, but first we're going to install a few more dependencies here. So we're actually going to install Nest because we want to do also a backend application in Nest.js. And we can also install Tailwind support, so we can actually have access to some styling. So let's just add this here and install it. Okay, am I hooked up to the internet? I hope so. Okay. Great, so now let's see. Here we have our commands for creating actual libraries. And you can run them with the NX CLI. You can also run them with IDE plugins if you want to, but for now we're just going the CLI way. So here let's have a quick look on the actual properties that we're passing in. So we're giving it a name, we're making it standalone in Angular, we're giving it a prefix, which is FSM for the name of our monorepo, which is full stack mono. We're making it strict, adding SCSS styles. And that's the first thing that's a bit interesting here. So we're adding some tags to our project. In this case, we're adding a scope, which is concert. So let's say we want to maybe build a concert feature to our music application. And we were giving it a type, which is feature. And so let's maybe head back to our slide. So there is this concept of types and scopes in NX, yeah, and they are basically handled by this tags. And types, I mean, you're free to choose what kind of types you're giving in, yeah. So there are no like explicit rules, but there are like some patterns that you can use. For example, you can type your libraries like as a utility library, for example, which can contain only like low-level utils, like some methods or helpers that can be used across many libs and apps. You can have like a UI kind of library, which will only contain components which are not really smart, yeah, so they're dumb representational components. In the best way, they only provide you with some inputs and outputs. You can have like a data access library, which is like having your API integration and maybe your state management in there. And then you have feature libraries in which you would you would like actually combine all of these kinds of libraries. So they will have like smart components. You will actually use your data access libraries to fetch things from your API and serve it to your UI components and have things like routing in there. And there can be more types of applications. Yeah, so you could also have, let's say, if you're having backend APIs, you could have like some API type of library, or you can have like a shared type of library where you can actually share maybe some sort of interfaces between your libraries. And there can be scopes. So they're a bit different from types. So scopes is actually basically the kind of domain scope of your library. So in our case, it could be concert domain, or it could be like a payment domain. And maybe you don't want that these kind of scopes interact too much with each other. Yeah, maybe you want them to have them strictly separated because they're having to deal with different things. And that's what you can do with NX. So you can create some sort of rules to actually enforce this. So let's see, in NX, this is basically done with ESLint. So if you're having a look in the ESLint config, you will see that there is an ESLint rule for enforcing module boundaries. And here you can basically define your own custom rules to actually achieve this. So let's just quickly pull this from my stash here. Here it is. And let's shelve this. Okay, so and now we'll see that we will actually have some rules inside here. I will go into this a bit more detailed in a second. Maybe let's first like actually create some sort of libraries first. So let's see. Let's start and create one. Create another one, and so on. All right, so these are like the four kind of libraries that we have talked about. So we have a feature one, a data access, a UI, and a utility library. And now let's also add a new application inside, which will actually be a nest application for our backend. Let's do one more for our backend API, and we're doing one more library for having shared things. Okay, so now we have like a lot of libraries here, yeah? And you might think, why should I do this whole kind of libraries? So if you're having some small projects only, maybe it's not necessary for you, yeah. But if you're having to deal with like a larger enterprise scope kind of libraries, it actually makes sense to have like them sort of structured in this kind of way. All right, so now let's see. We can actually visualize this for you. NX has a tool called NX Graph that you can start. You can start it by running NX Graph, and we will just start it in the watch mode. So here, it will start this small application for you where you actually have like a visual representation of your current workspace. And if we click on showing all the projects here, you will actually get an overview of all of the projects that you have inside. So currently, not much is going on here because all of these projects are not really interacting with each other. Yeah? So we would actually need to start implementing something here. And let's maybe also start our actual or maybe no, let's not do this. Let's maybe just create some services first. Yeah? So we have some things that we can actually work in. So we're going to create an Angular service inside our data access library here. And let's do it in a new tab, so we don't have to stop our graph. So we're getting a service, and here we're creating a Nest controller, because we want to have like a backend controller that serves some data for us. Okay, I think my IDE just froze. Technical problems all the way today. Okay, just give it a second. All right. So we wanted to do this one. So service. And the controller I mentioned, and also just one interface so we can share actually a kind of type between our libraries. So now let's have another look. We will still have our libraries here, and we actually now created some code inside of these libraries. And now let's maybe start our applications. So in NX, you can basically run these kind of targets that I've showed you before by just hitting NX run, and then using the kind of application or library that you want to tackle, like music in this example, and then the target that's configured in your project JSON. So this could be build, for example, or in our case, surf. So, but since we have to actually have like two applications, we have a front-end Angular app and a back-end Nest.js app, we want to actually run both of them. So you can also use the run mini command to use the surf target of both of these apps, and you can then just add them with the projects flag. So it would be music's and music's API. All right. I mean, if you're doing something like with Docker, you would do this differently. Yeah, you would use actually maybe some Docker Compose setup, where you would start your different kind of apps in different kind of containers here. But since we're doing this locally, we can easily do it like this. All right, so now let's see. Our front-end app should be running here. So you're getting some kind of demo component from NX, which we will delete in a second. And on the port 300, you will get our API running that also returns some default response. All right, now, so let's actually start coding and not only generating. So let's go to our, where we do go first, to our shared library where we have our interface stored in. Yeah? So in here, actually, we created this concert interface, and we will just give it some types. Like, let's say we're giving it some title, which will be a string. We're giving our concert a location, and we will also give it a date when it happens, which will be just a date string in the end. So, and now we want to actually take advantage of having access to this interface in our data access library and also in our API library, where we actually return some data for this concerts inside the backend. So we're getting here to our concerts controller. And now we actually can import this interface from this different app. Yeah? So what we need to do is actually use the import path for this library. And how we're going to do this. So NX will automatically create a path mapping for your library each time you're generating it. Yeah? So it will add it inside your global tsconfig file. It will use the name of your workspace and the kind of path that you have chosen as a name for your library. And it will point it to the index.ts of your library, which is then the public export for it. So this means that if we want to import something from our shared library, we actually need to export it from there. So let's head back to the, where was it? Shared library. And let's actually export it from here. I mean, you're getting a default export out of the box here for everything that's inside, but I like to actually be a bit more explicit about my export. So we're going to export only one thing from here, which would be, let's say, sorry. It's actually inside interfaces here. Oh, of course, sorry, I forgot the from keyword. Okay, and we're going to export our interface here, and then we will actually use it inside of our API library. So we're going to create one route in here, which will be a get route. Let's say it should get all of the concerts that there are. And this should then return an array of concerts, for example. So now we need to actually import this, and you can see it will use the parse that we just saw. And now that's like the first time when we now make a connection from our one API to our shared interface. Yeah? So actually our graph should have updated because now we're making a connection between these two libraries. So let's start it again. And let's show our projects. And you can see that our concert API is now actually making a connection to our shared API because we required some interface from there. Okay, so what does it actually mean? If we're going back here to our slides, you can see that there's should maybe not be possible for everything that you want to do inside your Monorepo. So you can create this module boundaries that we've talked before. So this here could be a pattern how you could actually structure your module boundaries. So let's see that on top you have your maybe end-to-end test, could be Cypress, for example. And this should maybe only make like, or should interact with your actual application and nothing else. Whereas in your actual application, so on this level, it should be able to talk to your API services or libraries in this case, and to the feature and these other kind of libraries that we've talked before. Yeah? So this is basically a pattern that is then more used inside front-end kind of area. So for example, let's see, in the feature scope or in the feature type of library, we discussed that there will be like the more smart components. Yeah, we have the routing, and that's basically the part where we have access to all of these other kind of subtypes, like data access and UI and utility. But these kind of types, they should, on the other hand, not have access to your feature type. So they should only maybe have access to utility. Same for UI, and utility shouldn't have like access to any other kind of type of library. Yeah? So it can only be using its own kind of utility libraries. Right, so the other connections that we have is that our feature and data access type can have access to the shared scope, or the shared type, sorry, and same for the API. Yeah? So this is just an example how you could like structure your module boundaries, yeah? But at least like this scope or like this diagram here on the left is actual a quite common pattern in the NX ecosystem. Yeah? So let's actually try out to violate this this boundaries. So if we're here inside our API library, and let's say we want to import something from the feature library, that should not be allowed, right? So let's see, we're going to just create a const which is of type, or let's maybe make a let of type. What do we have? We have concert feature component, for example, and it will import it here from the concert feature library, and you already see that you're getting some red squiggly lines. Yeah, so an ESLint will complain that a project tag with your type API can only depend on libs tag with type API. And this is basically a rule that we set up before in our ESLint config. So let's just have a look at this. So here we basically set up the rules that you saw here in this diagram. So we said that libraries with the source tag type end-to-end can only depend on libraries with tags app. So that's basically this connection. And the same we're doing for app with feature, data access UI, and so on that we're seeing here, and so on and so forth. And because we are having the rule for our API down below here, that it should only depend on libs with type API or shared, it's not allowed to actually import the feature that you have seen inside the concert controller here. So if we're going to actually lint this library, so you can just run the nx lint command with the name of the library, you should get a linting error. And you can basically then use this technique on your CI to detect if somebody violated maybe this kind of module boundaries. So you can see here it will serve you with an error. Okay, so let's just continue quickly with actually implementing a few things. So let's say our concert endpoint should return us, it should return an array of concerts. I don't know, let's maybe just pick some, I don't know, classic metal bands which are playing in our area. Let's say they will play in Wiesbaden. Let's say in a Schlachthof. Also, I doubt that they will play at Schlachthof, but and let's say we a price. Oh, whew. Yeah, it doesn't fit on the screen, I think. So let's say they will play here in a few months. And of course, we're making a string out of this. And I don't know, let's say RheinMain will play in Mainz in the Kulturzentrum. Yeah, whatever. And I don't know, let's say Slayer will play in Ingelheim. Does anybody know a place in Ingelheim? Huh?
K-I-N-G.
K-I-N-G. Like King? Okay. Yeah, it actually matches Kerry King. Okay, yeah, so now we have our endpoint set up ready. So let's maybe just test it inside our browser. So if we're going to acquire our concerts endpoint here. Ah, sorry, did I make a mistake? Ah, of course, since we just set this up inside our concert module, it's not being hooked up to our actual application yet. Yeah, so we need to import this module so it's actually being used by our application. And now it's just restarting. Or let's see, did something go wrong here? Ah, there it is, sorry. It was just a small hiccup, okay. All right, now let's have a look at our actual application for Angular. We will just remove this whole demo component here because we don't really need it. So inside our HTML, we're going to remove it. Now we have some white space, so let's just make this a bit more fancy. Let's, I don't know, let's just apply some background color, some white text, maybe some padding. Okay. And then let's actually call our endpoint inside our data access library that we discussed before. So in here, we can now create a new API call inside the service that we created. So let's just inject our HTTP client from Angular, which would be HTTP client. Getting no suggestions. What's going on? Okay, now it's there. And we actually need to provide a method for loading our concerts. So we will use our HTTP client to make a GET request. And we're using the same interface again that we defined before. Let's see, this one. So we're getting type safety also for our front-end types. And we're making this call to our API on the concert controller with the all endpoint. So normally inside a data access library, you would do something more elaborated, like using a state management library, maybe NGRX or something like this. But to make things simple, we're going to just use like a service with a subject in this case. So we're having our concerts here, which will be behavior subject, also of type concert array, which will be empty initially. And here in our pipe, we will then just set it. So we're getting our concerts here, and we're saying next to our concerts. Okay, so this should be enough to actually load our concerts and storing it inside our subject. And now we're actually going to render these kind of data in our feature library. So in here, let's maybe create a button to actually call the service. So this would be like a new method, load concerts. And maybe let's also make it a bit fancy. Let's add some, I don't know, padding, some background color, and maybe make it round. Okay, so let's see. Oh, of course, we will get an error because we haven't defined this method yet. So let's hook it up now. And let's see if, oh yeah, of course, like our application doesn't know our feature yet, because we haven't imported it yet in our Angular application. So let's just quickly do this inside of our routes. So in here, we need to like hook up an actual route for our feature. We're just using the default empty path, and we're going to actually load this with lazy loading. So we're going to import it from, what was it? Concert feature. And then we're going to just, get our concert feature routes. Okay, and since this route here, it directly serves our concert feature component under this class, we should now get a button in here that we actually created. Okay, now, so clicking this button should actually load our service, or like should call our service. So let's just inject this here. Let's just call this service for now, and it will be our concert service. And you see it will try to use like a relative path for this import, and that's because we haven't exported this yet. So let's quickly do it here. Let's say export, and we're going to export this service. Voila. And so this was the correct place, yeah. So it automatically fixed my import for me. And we're then just going to use the service to do the call for loading our concerts. And we're providing our subject to the outside world by just, let's see, using this observable. Okay, good. Now we have it ready to be like iterated over in our template here. So maybe let's just create a div that will like render this. Let's just use a flex with some gap. And we're going to use our UI component. We're going to iterate over our observable, the async pipe. And we're going to provide the data to the actual UI component. Of course, for this, we would need to have some inputs first. So let's say, what did we have? We had a title for our concerts, and we had the location and the date. And inside here, oh, sorry, that was the wrong part here. Let's say we're just making a headline for our title, and maybe we're doing just a paragraph for the, what was it, the location and the date. and let's use the date pipe to make a nice date out of it. And it will complain because it's theoretically nullable. You could do it like this to actually allow it, but Angular 16 also has a nice feature for required inputs. So you can now actually make your input required. And then it will actually throw an error if you forgot to provide this input from the outside. So actually here we can then make it explicit that this will never be undefined. All right, so now let's hook up our actual data to this component in here. So our title will come from concert title. Oh, and I made a mistake here. This should be as, of course. Okay, it doesn't look too happy here. I forgot. Oh, sorry. That's, of course, the syntax I wanted to use. And we have our concert date and the location. So, all right, so let's see if it works. Of course, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because we're getting an error that the HTTP client is not imported yet. So let's just do it on the application level for us. Let's see, since we're having a standalone application, it's being done inside here with the new provide HTTP client syntax. All right, so if we're now loading this, you will get some output here from our backend API. So now we have like all of our libraries, some sort of interacting with each other. And if we have another look on our graph, you see that it actually changed now. So you can see that our Angular app, it has access to our feature because we're actually using our feature for routing our feature component in here. It uses the UI components to actually render each concert for us. We're using the data access library to making our service call to the actual API backend, which we're using a shared interface for. And this interface is also being used by our concerts API, which is being used by our actual Nest.js API, this Musics API. So, and this kind of diagram now a bit represents what we have seen before in our scope here. And what we now actually want to do is we want to detect like affected changes if we're going to make a change to one of these libraries. So let's first maybe commit everything so it's out of the way. So let's just say git add. Let's just commit everything, because in NX, like it detects changes, what you have done in your applications based on the current branch that you're on and your main branch that you configured. Yeah. So by default, this is the main branch. So it will use a command called affected to like compare your current branch that you're on with the main branch to see what kind of things changed. So to get you some feedback about it. So we can use also the graph feature for it to have a look at that. And since we are like on a feature branch here, so we're on initial, we're actually using the git head of our current branch as a comparison. Yeah? So it will compare my local changes with the head of the current command. And if we're going, okay, I think it failed because I have the graph already running here. Maybe let's kill this one. Okay, and as you can see, there's nothing shown here, because nothing currently changed because I just committed everything to the repository. So let's actually do a change and let's see where should we do it. If we're doing a change inside our feature library here, it should actually only have effects to the ones that are consuming this library, which in this case would be the Musics app and our end-to-end test that tests this app. So let's make a change. So we're going inside of our feature library here. I don't know, let's just go inside this and let's just make a comment here, which will be interpreted as a change. And then let's restart the graph again. You can see that there's actually a button here that something changed. And you can see that now NX recognized that there was a change in this library. And it will actually show you that all the affected libraries here are basically the parent ones that are consuming this feature. And you can actually use this for running your targets. So let's say if I want to only run the, let's say the build maybe, so you can run NX affected and use your build target. And we need to explicitly now say that our base is head again, otherwise it will take the main branch. And for this, you will see that it will now build only the Musics app. And this is because only this application here has the build target actually configured. Yeah, you don't have this in Cypress or in the feature library. If we're going to use maybe the linting target instead, you will see that it runs the linting target for all of these 3 projects. Now, what would happen if I make a change in the concert feature library? Yeah? So it's being consumed by like a lot of dependencies. Yeah, so basically it's like being used by these 2 libraries, but since they are like other libraries depending on it, you should have also getting a change for this one. So now let's see. We will go inside of our interface, which should be here. Let's add some foo command in here. And let's start our, where was it? Here, our graph again. So now you would see that basically all of these kind of paths are now affected, except for the concert UI, because it's not in that actual hierarchy here. Yeah. And if I would do this again, so I would like add or run the linting command, you'll see that it will actually run more because more are affected. But you will also see that some of them finished quite fast. Yeah? So because here, for example, you can see that the existing output matched the cache, and that's because I already ran this this task before, and nothing changed in this specific library. So you can just like use a fallback to the cache again, and you will see this more detailed if I just run the same linting command again. Like everything will be just get from the cache, and you don't. And I'm actually also getting an error, because I don't have a tag inside this library. Yeah? But yeah, I think you get the idea. Yeah. So you can actually use this to your advantage in your CI environment, for example. So if you just want to change or just want to run targets for the actual projects that changed inside CI, this is like a very helpful tool. And I think I might have skipped also this kind of slide. So yeah, this actually like a simpler representation to get you maybe a better idea again. So let's say you have a very simple setup where like your one application is being using a library and your second one too, but you only have a change in your one library in your application. It won't affect anything at all. But if you're doing this for the library that's being consumed by everything here, you will have like your change. Okay, I hope that was somewhat interesting for you. I know it was a lot. Actually also had some bonus topics covered, but maybe we're running a bit out of time. Yeah? So you can actually also do parallelization. I will just head quickly over them. Yeah, you can have like composable generators to create some like code for you, and you can actually also reuse this generators inside other generators. Depends on handling, so you can actually make your builds depending on other targets, or you can basically make everything dependent on another target. That could be handy if maybe, for example, your build depends on maybe building some specific files before you actually can build your application. And that's actually a nice feature. I think we can quickly have a look on this here. So that's quite helpful if you're going to do backend APIs in Docker. So let's see, because normally your package JSON, it will already look quite big here, yeah? And if you're going to like build a backend application inside a monorepo, you don't want to have that much dependencies inside your node modules, for example, in your container. And what you can do with this is every time that you will actually build your node application. So let's do it here, for example, and have a look at our dist output. So you can see it will build your main.js and your assets, but not much more. So you can also configure this to generate a package JSON file for you. So let's say here we can configure this. I guess it's in the options here, right? So, and if we're now running the build again, you will see that in the generated dist output, here it is, you will actually get a package JSON file that will only contain the dependencies that your actual project is really using, yeah. And so this is really useful if you want to make actually slim Docker images that don't take up so much space when you're building them. Okay, what else? We have Storybook support built in right away, so it's kind of very easy to hook it up to a library or an application to serve stories for your components. And the NX Cloud support, I think we talked about it already a bit. And yeah, thanks for having me. If you want to have access to the resources, you can either scan this QR code or take this link. We'll just take you to the repository with the code, and also the presentation is inside of it. Go to NX to find out more about the NX tool itself. And you can also go to monorepo.tools if you want to learn more about monorepos. All right, so if you have any questions, please ask them in the Q&A section now. And yeah, thanks again. Okay, there's one question.
What was the tipping point for you to start using it? Was it time? Was it number of bugs? Was it confusion? Was it complexity?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, I can repeat. So what was the tipping point for you at Textbroker to start using monorepos? Was it time, bugs, confusion?
Mm-hmm. So I think the starting point, we started about using it 4 years ago, you know? And we already had multiple applications that we wanted to start in there, yeah. And so we kind of thought about, okay, how can we actually share some common code between these libraries, yeah. So, and first we thought, okay, let's just create some npm packages, yeah. So we had our own Verdaccio registry set up to actually publish them. But when we already did some MVP for this, we already found out that it's really cumbersome to handle the changes. That if you're doing a change in this library, you have to change something in the one application and the other. Maybe if you have a library that uses another library, you will end in a very complex hell of dependencies here. Yeah? So that's the part when we looked in NX, and we were also actually quite happy with the kind of tool set that they provide for you, yeah? Especially with all of these affected handlings and the all integrations that they're giving you. And also over the last 4 years, so we've also seen this tool grow, yeah, and I think also the community inside of it is quite strong, yeah. So you also get some good feedback, you're getting some good blog posts and YouTube tutorials and all of these kind of things, yeah. So it's a nice ecosystem for this, and yeah, that's also the reason why we stayed with it.
How was the migration? So how did you get from polyrepo to monorepo? Was it a lot of work to get from A to B?
Yeah, well, it was back then not like a real setup that we went live with there. So it was just like a small MVP that we did, and we could just throw it away again. Yeah, so we didn't really have to do a migration. But what we had is we had like an existing Angular application before that we migrated in there. And yeah, it was some kind of hassle initially. Yeah, so it was because of course you need to like move your projects in, you need to adjust your import path and things like this. Yeah, but yeah, I think it was worth it.
Are you missing anything from Polorepos?
From monorepos in general, you mean?
No. Are you missing anything from Polorepos?
From polyrepos.
So from the old times?
I guess like the only thing is that when there is like an update for, let's say, an Angular update, like a major version, yeah, and you're doing it, and you have like, I would say, let's say over 100 libraries that you need to migrate, yeah, it's always like a big task that you need to do, yeah, and it can take a few days until you have like everything set up. I mean, there are, of course, migrations, like, of course, the official Angular migrations, but also the ones that NX puts on top for you to make things easier. Yeah? So this actually helps a lot. Yeah. So sometimes it's very fast, but sometimes if they're doing changes that maybe break some things, yeah, or maybe have some unforeseen consequences, you get like a lot of places that you need to fix. But on the other hand, if you would have, let's say, 3 or 4 different projects in different repositories, you would need to do this like one after each other, yeah. Or maybe you would say, okay, this project is so old, let's not migrate this, we don't have the time for it, yeah. So this setup actually forces you to do updates, yeah. And yeah, even though it's sometimes a bit tedious, it also keeps your applications up to date. So that's also a good thing.
Not actually a question, but I found out I got an information when I joined the QR code, when I clicked on it or like went to the link, it's expired and it says something, you need to choose a plan. Maybe if it just takes 2 seconds, maybe you can update it or so, but not much of importance. I mean, we can share the links later anyway in another way.
Yeah, okay, I can do it afterwards, yeah, and then, I mean, or maybe just make a photo of the link instead if you want to. Otherwise, it's just /decline on GitHub, so you will find it, I guess.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for the talk anyways. But yeah, could you elaborate some details how you use or at what scale you use NX at Textbroker? Because you mentioned you have hundreds of libraries. How big is your then quite big monorepo, I guess? And how many people are working together on that monorepo?
Yeah, so from an application level, I think we have about 6 to 7 applications running inside there. I don't have like exact numbers for the libraries, but I would say they are between 100 and 150 libraries. Yeah. And we're working here in a team with, like, especially on this kind of project, I would say like 5 persons managing it. Yeah.
Okay, because we in our company also use NX. We, besides managing JavaScript with that, we also sprinkle some Go in there. And we have, I guess, or we see some issues at scaling, because especially if you work with multiple people on that, then having multiple branches, of course, open that both or multiple branches affect maybe a core library. And then I guess that brings us problems with, of course, then merging stuff in the end, because then I guess we switch to, I guess, approach where we force to rebase your branch, so that somebody merges the core library for his branch first, then the others need to update their branches so that the pipeline run again with the merge result, and that, I guess, queues a lot of pipelines on our side, and even with caching and so on, I guess that then runs quite long, because of course, core libraries mostly affect then all apps, and that leads to some issues on our side or long waiting times. Yeah.
So how long is your CI pipeline running in general then? Do you have some estimates there?
I guess I would say in worst case, if all, like, because we have also like integration tests also with Cypress in there, I would say like a full pipeline run with them that affects, I guess we currently have like 8 projects with then the same shape library. I would say half an hour is our pipeline currently running. Of course, if it's only touching a single project, then we can use caching and only the affected parts, and then it's faster. But of course, that hurts quite because it's a lot of staring at pipelines. And I guess that's the biggest downside, I would say, for our usage of this Monorepo approach. But yeah, of course, there are big benefits. And I guess quick hint to the NX Cloud. We started using NX Cloud, or when we switched to NX, then we, of course, relied on NX Cloud because we then don't need to care about sharing this cache between runs, because I guess it's all about caching, but somewhere the cache needs to be stored. And the easiest setup is, of course, NX Cloud. And I guess they now recently changed their pricing model.
Right, yeah.
So you mentioned now free tier is 300 pipeline runs. But the issue is that I guess in a month we would do, 2,000, 3,000 pipeline runs. So for us, this would not be maintainable price-wise.
Okay, yeah.
So that's why we then switched to a local cache. So now we have one cache server running where then all the artifacts are stored.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so what we're doing, we're not using NX Cloud also with the paid plan. Yeah, so you can still use it. Yeah? And if you're expiring it, it will just not like show you any more insights on your CI runs anymore. Yeah. We're using GitHub Actions for our CI runs, and we are not using the GitHub runners for it, but AWS based runners like with Spot instances, which are quite cheap and powerful in relation to the other ones. And yeah, we're also using like the GitHub Actions cache for actually doing this. And we're also doing like a lot of parallelization on the CI. Yeah? So I think we're having for a monorepo like a big kind of runner that has like 36 cores, so you can actually really scale horizontally, and that actually saves a lot of time for us. Yeah. But also the Cypress tests are the most like the ones that take up the most time. So there's actually one new feature which is quite nice. So normally you would have to let me just show it here in the graph maybe again. So yeah, since your E2E sits on top of your application, and so that like every affected library will have an effect on this then. It will always trigger the Cypress run again. Yeah? So if you have maybe done some change in a utility library, for example, and what is new now is that you can actually define your Cypress tests or targets based on the feature level now. Yeah? So you can hook up your feature lib with a Cypress target, and what it will do, it will just quickly spin up a related app where this feature is actually hosted. Yeah? But it will only run the Cypress tasks inside of this feature. And then you would also not get that much runs because the detection cycle doesn't go up that well. So we haven't like implemented it yet in our monorepo, because it's quite new. I think they released it a few weeks ago, but I guess if also like the Cypress tests are a bottleneck for you, have a look in it, so maybe it helps.
Yeah, I guess we started like parallelizing out of the Cypress tests, so splitting Cypress tests into different, like that we have 2 or 3 Cypress tests that have then their specs in there running parallel. I guess that saved a lot of time, but I guess there's always a way to optimize. And of course, core library changes are of course always like painful or pretty painful with this approach. But I guess would anyways, because otherwise you would hop through different repositories, updating all the apps, and then the single pipeline would run. But yeah.
And like what interests me is how are you using Go inside this? Because like, did you make like your own kind of plugin integration, or did you use some community plugins for this?
Yeah, of course. I guess so first of all, if you search for monorepos, then you, I guess, immediately stumble across Cypress, about NX, because I guess their marketing is quite good. And then of course the front-end people told us, and there's also a Go plugin, which of course is only like really touching the most top level of Go and doesn't really help us that much. So we integrated a lot of stuff, and we extensively use this NX workspace feature, and then actually do Go commands in there to compile apps and so on. And you can basically call whatever bash command you want and just do dependencies on each other. So I guess that's what we do. Yeah, of course, the detection and affected and caching is not as nice as of NPM or JS ecosystem in general, but yeah, I guess it does the job so far good. And we, of course, then have everything bundled in one piece and ship different artifacts then out of the runs. Yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Any other question? Okay, cool. Then I think I'm not visible on YouTube, but from the off, I say again, thank you, Dominik, for this awesome talk. It was really cool. It was well prepared. It was the right length. I think I gained a lot of insights. And yeah, thanks again. That was lovely. So we can say goodbye to the YouTube audience. Manu, the supporting for the tech today, can actually stop the YouTube live stream. So I hope it was recorded and streamed at all. Let's see. Oh, but you can stop it actually in the tool at the very top right. Or force quit. Yes. Did you stop it? Okay, good. Then goodbye to the YouTube audience. See you for our next meetup.
I don't have the right.
Ah, cool. Nice. So actually I need to stop
Okay, bye.
it.